intersections between film and video art installation, spatial, temporary, and contexts in the spectator. Introduction. Context as an artistic trend has been proposed by a number of authors, highlighting the inclusion of these provisions in the marginal currents of the art market that just questioned the productive relationship with the institutions of art and exhibition spaces, and individual authorships in the fact of art making. The complex interest of artists working in the film medium in the specificity of place, time, and audience had long been present in the work of artists who use the medium of video from the critical perspective of inherited visual culture, mainly cinema. This paper analyzes the temporality and spatiality of the moving image and its manipulation as a conceptual resource in the work of Doug Aitken, Douglas and Gregory Chatonsky. Douglas, Memories of Reception, Speculation and Setback. One of the most recurrent tactics of the devices that depend on technology and the temporary duration as interpretative dimension is the disruption of temporalities that makes self-reflexivity to emerge. In confrontation to the presence of multiple and simultaneous temporalities that generate an interpretative hypertrophy. Douglas articulates also the fracture of failure of place as a strategic element in which inserts cryptic contents in the middle of exhibitions and clothing the work of other meanings. We see this in early works like monodramas. Douglas uses the model of television production with the aim of examining a game of ambivalences, which undoubtedly carry about a multiplicity of temporalities that take place within a retroactive character. That's to say, explores the temporal consciousness through visual technologies and systems representations that always operate in the third. Douglas develops in many of his works that dreamlike process where times seem to have other rhythm, the one confronted to the vicissitude of things, cyclically contradictory and antagonistic. However, we must take into account what Gadamer recognized as the time of the work of art, that is to say, that time that does not have a calculable duration but deploys a suspension of time, where the viewer's permanence is the one that activates their multiplicity, their heterochronies. Doug Aitken, Visual Contrarratives, Narrative Rhythms and Changing Times. One of the most frequent variables in the work of Doug Aitken is the polarization between the actual energies of nature and the metamorphosis of the identity of the subject and the artificial scenarios present in large metropolis. Aitken's updates a resistance to velocity, repetitions and sense of time issued from modernity without articulating, as it is expressed by Virilio, a deceleration, but by means of global time experimentation, with time of the metropolis in its dimension space to explore its possibilities as a living organism. In this way, Sleepwalkers conforms. Configured for 5 movies and 8 large-scale projections on both different surfaces and paths of the architecture of the Museum of Modern Art of New York. These projections present 5 stories interconnected and synchronized kinetically to reflect 5 protagonists' everyday life: a messenger, an electrician, a post office worker, an executive, and an office worker accomplishing routines in chorus. The importance of the context of ubiquity in the works of Aitken is determined by what Paul Arden has defined as abolishing spatiotemporal barriers between creation and perception of the works. In this way, the position of the works of Aitken do not formulate themselves under an order of reivindication, but insert themselves in the social landscape as elements attached to the space involved, and that deploy strategies to question and reassess the notions of public space and private space. Also to experience or relate cultural correspondences, which implement art and everyday life in an attempt to reconfigure perceptual experience as a generator of what Pierre Kaufman has called the emotional experience of space. Gregory Chatonsky, Narrative, Fiction, Appropriation and Remix. Gregory Chatonsky develops in his work the possibility of generating an endless fiction, what he calls fiction without narration. From the data flowing on the web using the application from various websites, Flickr, Twitter, chats and tools such as Google Maps or Google Street View, the artist produces combinations of various elements, mashups having an interface that is updated as the user observes. Taking internet flows as a starting point, the weighting proposes the fiction of the inhabitants of the network. It is the story of the life of one person or another, but the history of internet machine that fits on our daily lives. There are 2 types of these internet streams that take as a starting point the judgments of users in real time on the web. Conclusion. Finally, we conclude this brief exploration of the concept of spatial temporality, narrative, context, and the spectator in the work of Doug Aitken, Douglas and Gregory Chatonsky with 2 questions about the audience that collect in a decisive way the essence of their work. On one hand, the viewing time mentioned by Kate Mondloch, and secondly, the reception time which develops Peter Osborne. Both frequencies are closely related to the subjectivity of the viewer and the ability to make their own interpretations, both the construction of narratives as well as the absorption of various temporalities operating simultaneously. On the other hand, the distracted reception mentioned by Peter Osborne claims a kind of heterochronic behavior in the reception of the work, because every work develops its own time in relation to its location in the exhibition space, and the absorption by the viewer that generates a dialectics of attention distraction.